Resident Evil is a franchise that keeps on giving, and to conclude Resident Evil month here at GPX Japan, we thought we'd do something a little different. How about a top 10 list of the best Resident Evil games of all time?
The first game in an actual multi-million-dollar franchise places 10 on our list. I know what you're thinking. It's the original Resident Evil. Sure, the graphics aren't as pretty anymore, and yeah, the tank controls might be a pain to navigate with, but you have a giant mansion to explore with tons of puzzle elements, hungry zombies, and crazy scientists. What more do you need? There's something endearing about the cheesiness of the story, the voice acting, the characters. It's a classic in that regard alone. And hey, if you played in a dark room with some headphones, it still might freak you out. It's a good introduction to the series, and it sets up the lore that's found a way to continue almost 30 years on. With 2 playable stories clocking in at about 7 hours each, it makes Chris and Jill's first escape worth it. And come on, it's filled with classic lines like this.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Resident Evil 3 Remake turned out to be slightly more divisive than its previous remake brother, cutting out portions of the original with a more concise story, the Nemesis becoming more of a multi-layered boss encounter, and the paring back of the intense gore. But this by no means makes it a bad game. On the contrary, it feels rather sharply focused. The intensity of escaping Raccoon City is heightened, and the dodge mechanics play into the more frantic game loop. Jill and company are redesigned in immaculate detail. The finale is extremely epic, and I'm glad we got to deviate from the norm in such a laser-focused manner. Despite the turning point of the series for being too action-oriented, which led to the despicable Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 5 gets little respect for something it does extremely well: co-op. The horror and survival aspects are more intense than ever as enemies rush and overwhelm you. Over the years, it's aged quite well, providing the conclusive end to the Wesker storyline, the introduction of the amazing Shiva, a really cool character, and making Chris into an unstoppable, boulder-punching Macho Chad.
Let's go back to the beginning. Well, before the beginning began, there was the actual beginning. It's RE0, taking place before the mansion incident in RE1. RE0 starts off with Rebecca's STARS team as they escort Billy the convict to some sort of jail. The game plays a lot like RE1, returning to tank controls and fixed camera perspectives. The starting setting of the train is sublime, and the option to switch between characters at almost any time to solve different puzzles and take on different enemies is a decent mix-up that could be built upon further in the future. Unfortunately, after the train, the game more or less reverts to an RE1 clone. It's not bad by any means, it just would be better if they kept that creative edge.
At number 6 we have the original Resident Evil 2. In this entry, the 2 playable characters, Claire and Leon, must explore and escape the STARS home base, the Raccoon City Police Department, after taking refuge there amidst the zombie outbreak. Leon and Claire each have 2 playable scenarios, which allows for at least 4 unique playthroughs, with each having a character-specific companion that accompanies them during their journey as well. The inclusion of the sound-sensitive lickers and Mr. X will keep players on their toes, as they solve puzzles and make their way through the abandoned police department. Resident Evil 2 offers a different experience than its remake, so it's definitely worth checking it out if you haven't. The first-person horror continues in our number 5 spot. Resident Evil Village is a fantastic game in its own right, so it goes to show how strong the later entries on this list are. The game is originally first person like its predecessor, and you'll get tons of survival horror up close and personal. Coming off of Resident Evil 7, Village combines that game's horror elements with the action elements of 4. It does wander quite a bit into the fantastical and even feels a bit less grounded than 7, but the gameplay is fantastic, and hey, it does freak you out when it needs to. From fighting beasts in the village, to tension in the castle, and the nightmare-fueled dollhouse, you can be assured you'll be awake all night after playing this game for the first time.
Coming in at number 4, we have the remake of Resident Evil. Released only 6 years after the original, the remake manages to build upon what the original had, and then some, adding refreshing new elements such as more lore, the terrifying yet tragic Lisa Trevor, as well as adding defense items that help in a pinch when a zombie attacks, not to mention the chilling atmosphere in the form of an added graveyard, and the ferocious Crimson Heads. Make this a standout Resident Evil remake, even amongst the recent remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3.
Coming in at third is Resident Evil 2 Remake. For years it seemed like it would never come out. Resident Evil was remade a few years after the original release, but 2 didn't see a remake until 21 years later. And boy oh boy was it worth the wait. Opting to go for a Resident Evil 4 style over-the-shoulder shooter as opposed to a fixed camera style the remake of the first game did, Leon and Claire's reimagined first adventure amps up the horror and gore with a lot of scenes that are sure to make you squirm. If you played the original one, you might think you've got things figured out, but the game throws twists and turns, so don't let your guard down, especially when you have Mr. X hot on your trail. Running through the Raccoon City police station has never been this fun, and with the B stories mixing things up for a fresh challenge and a new area in the form of the orphanage, it's sure to satisfy and spook fans of the series and those looking to dip their toes in.
After the primordially abysmal display that was RE6, RE7 is a true return to the series' roots. Horror. Trading in the mainstay characters for newcomer Ethan and third person for first person in-your-face thrills, RE7 revolutionized the series for the modern age. Set on a well-creepy farm with a supposedly nice family that turn out to be well-creepy psychos, the game packs that eerie, freakish punch that has been lacking in previous installments. It might not be as action-packed as 4 or 5, but RE7 ushers in a new era for the BIOHAZARD juggernaut. Check it out!
Not only the best Resident Evil game, but quite possibly one of the best games of all time. What more could be said? The game ditched Umbrella and its messy melodrama in the opening credits. Leon is back, cooler and more Chad-like than ever before, spouting smooth lines and swift kicks. The Ganados are only the tip of the new horror this game hides. Let's just say near the third act, the game brings out the creepiest enemy you could ever ask for. Resident Evil 4 manages to cover every single aspect of survival horror, from intense mobs to eerie isolation horrors to enemies stalking Leon to intense battles against towering monsters. Every aspect is refined and polished to a diamond-like sheen. Nothing comes close to being as memorable, as quotable, as adventurous, or as groundbreaking as Resident Evil 4. And that concludes our Resident Evil month. We all like to thank you here at GPX Japan for liking our videos, commenting, subscribing, and if you haven't, hey, now's a good chance to do so. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful November, and we'll see you soon.